Let's talk to Brooke Rollins, Agriculture Secretary. Get to the USDA in a moment here. I want to first ask you about the economy. A couple little competing opinions here, all right? Here's the White House for you. Kevin Hassett said this yesterday morning.
There are a lot of reasons to be extremely bullish about the economy going forward, but for sure this quarter there are some blips in the data. What's going to happen is the first quarter is going to squeak into the positive category, and then the second quarter is going to take off as everybody sees the reality of the tax cuts.
Okay, so you got that, and you got Charlie Gasparino writing this, saying Wall Street pukes up its own medicine. And it's call for number two, guys. And what he talks about is deregulation. He talks about the Trump team trying to deleverage the federal government and get it out of the American economy here. Brooke, on the flip side of that, you have J.P. Morgan now saying a recession is up to a 40% possibility. So what is it? Is it Hassett and Gasparino, or is it Jamie Dimon at J.P. Morgan?
Well, first of all, good morning, and thanks. Great to be with you on this beautiful day here at the White House. Listen, the bottom line is this. No one really knows, but here's what I do know, and here's what I believe, and my vision is exactly aligned with Kevin Hassett, my brilliant friend here running the National Economic Council, all of our dear friend Larry Kudlow and others, that this was always part of the plan, that the president's tool basket and his tools in that tool basket of how to truly bring our economy back after the malaise of the Biden years, but it's going to be a little bit bumpy. It will be imperfect. I mean, if it was easy and you could do it overnight, then it would happen with a snap of a fingers, but that's not it. And I think what's really telling is the president is so focused on not the short term, which, as we all know, in politics, everyone's always worried about the short term. He truly wants to fix America so that we have the American dream for everyone in a way that we lost in the last 4 years. And until Trump won, we'd lost for a long, long time. So this is really the reality where we are today. But I think Kevin's vision that it's going to be a little bumpy for a few weeks, but once we move into second quarter, we'll see a turnaround through deregulation, through lower taxes, through less government, through a focus on private enterprise and free markets versus a focus on bigger government spending, which is what we had in the last administration.
Madam Secretary, great to see you again on our program.
You too.
One of the things I'm wondering about is how the administration is thinking about helping protect the family farmer, because big conglomerates can maybe weather the storm that is coming. But family farmers, even if it is looking to second quarter, I mean, they live on such small margins in terms of profitability, if they can get to profitability. So losing some of this market share or having to deal with all of this uncertainty is a problem. Do you anticipate perhaps having to ask Congress for some sort of help for family farmers in America?
Well, Dana, great. Good to be with you also. Listen, the president has been intensely focused on how we protect and elevate and even take our farmers into a new day of prosperity. My very first phone call after I was sworn in was with President Trump, and that was his #1 message, was tell the farmers I love them and I am with them, and that we will use, talking about tools in the toolkit, we will use every tool that we have as we move into the next few months, the next year and beyond, to ensure that our farmers are protected. I'm in conversations all day, every day, to ensure that that happens. But Dana, I think one of the most important things that we will need to do, but it also goes back to the Biden administration, is in the last 4 years, we moved from a $0 deficit to a $49 billion trade deficit with our ag products. I mean, think about all of the farming community, but especially our family farms. Just that tiny margin of losing that export opportunity is huge. So part of my job, I was on two significant meetings yesterday. I'm going to be moving out across the world in the coming months, working on behalf and alongside our trade leaders here in this White House with President Trump, with Vice President Vance, to open the markets back up and to get our ag products out into the world, to ensure that we have obviously the robust market here at home, which the president has talked about. He had a very colorful conversation with Trudeau of Canada on the 250% tariffs on our dairy products that Canada imposes. We've got to right-size the ship, and that's what he's doing.
Okay, there's another thing here, right up your alley. USDA cancels $1 billion in local food purchasing for schools and food banks. How do you justify that?
Well, listen, I think it's really important. And of course, the left is doing what the left does. These were COVID era programs. These were additional funds, and then under Biden, more and more and more and more money. So just yesterday, we're canceling more contracts on food justice for trans people in New York and San Francisco. Obviously, that's different than the food programs in the schools, but it is really important. We spend billions and billions and billions of dollars on nutrition programs for lower income and socioeconomically disadvantaged kids. But the Biden administration used that to often push money out, taxpayer dollars out, that is not reaching its intended target. So that new program that came in the last few years, again, trying to spend more and more money, we're pulling that back. As we have always said, if we are making mistakes, we will own those mistakes and we will reconfigure. But right now, from what we are viewing, that program was non-essential, that it was a new program, and that it was an effort by the left to continue spending taxpayer dollars that were not necessary.
One last question for you. Are you finding, along with Elon Musk and his team, any sort of waste, fraud, and abuse, especially when it comes to sort of the climate change, global warming money that the Biden administration tried to push out in those last couple of months?
Dana, it's insane. And every day there's a new grant uncovered, or a new payment that was put out, or a new commitment that were not new for us, but that that was implemented under Biden that we're just uncovering. It is bordering on almost negligence, probably perhaps more than negligence, on the way our taxpayer dollars were spent. But we are on it. We're on the game. We're going to make sure that the taxpayers are represented. The voters voted for change with President Donald Trump, and we're going to really work every single day to truly make America great again. And that's a massive part of that effort.
Well, you sound like you're his speed, so thanks for coming back and talking with us today. Brooke Rollins, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I want to bring in now Steve Moore, former Trump economic advisor. Look, I know stocks go up, stocks go down. American public, they're watching this and saying 50% seems like a really big number, and they're seeing the markets react. Talk to us about the reality of this, and is there a reason not to worry?
Well, Harris, first of all, I agree with that clip you just showed a few minutes ago from my buddy Larry Kudlow, that this is the most pro-business, pro-investor president we've had in at least 40 years. And this is going to be an agenda that is going to supercharge the economy, no question. Are there bumps in the road? Yes. And you showed the massive increase in the debt. Look, Trump has inherited a god-awful mess from Joe Biden. Almost every trend was negative under Biden, especially the debt, the deficit, the illegal immigration. All of these things need fixing. And by the way, our trade imbalance increased dramatically. So I'm not the hugest fan of these tariffs, but I'll tell you, I think that these other countries, Harris, like Mexico and China and Canada, are making a big mistake, a huge mistake in thinking that they can win a kind of tit-for-tat game on this, because Trump will not relent here, and all they're doing is ruining their own economy. One other quick point, if I may. All of these countries have higher tariffs than we do. So all Trump is talking about, Harris, is leveling the playing field so we have a fair playing field for American products.
Even at 50%, I mean, I'm looking at this, and I know that seems really steep, but when you hear about the anti-American farmers, which you've heard the White House talking about from Alexandria Hoff's reporting, 250% tariffs on our dairy. I mean, they're making hand over fist. 50% sounds like a big number. 250 sounds like a crime.
It's outrageous. It's outrageous. We can't live with that. It's doing great damage to our farmers. And at the end of the day, Harris, what I'm going to predict is that Trump will prevail here because he's a winner. I would never bet against Donald Trump. And I believe what's going to happen is these other countries are going to be forced to lower their tariffs. And at the end of the day, I actually think we'll have freer but fairer trade. And I think Canada, Mexico, China, the Europeans have 3 times higher tariffs than we do, Harris. I mean, those have to come down. And I'm going to say this loud and clear one more time. If these countries think they can bully Trump, they've got it completely wrong. That's not a game they can win.
Well, and when they bully him, they bully the American people. The American people hired him. They understand enough about this process. Look, just real quickly, I'm looking at what Canada depends on from us. The list is long. Is the list long on their side? Are they giving us as much as we are giving them in terms of these tariffs? Sounds like they can't live without us with this list, at least when it comes to transportation of any kind.
Look, we're the hub of the world economy. Every country has to trade with us. Now, as I said, Harris, I'm a free trade guy. I do believe in the benefits of two countries trading with each other voluntarily. Makes both countries better off. But it is true that these countries have really taken advantage of the United States with very high tariffs on our agricultural products, our manufacturing products. And all Donald Trump is saying is, let's have a level playing field. I mean, Harris, who could argue against that?
All right, let's talk about what that looks like, because this is on the heels of having a tough stock market appearance yesterday anyway. There's a lot of money in the stock market, so you could break it down for us. I mean, what are we looking at 2 days in a row of this, if that's the case today?
Well, it is true that investors do not like tariffs. They don't like tariff wars. They're nervous about it. There's no question about it. Trump will prevail here. And in the end of the day, there's no question that we're going to see a booming stock market under Trump. Look what happened in his first term, Harris. We have one of the strongest stock markets ever. So this is a temporary transition. We've inherited a god-awful mess from Joe Biden. The debt and the deficit are larger than they've ever been. We've got a big correction to take place here. And I think once we get through this, one other quick thing, we've got to make the Trump tax cuts permanent. So Congress, get going on that. Exactly. That will lower taxes on every business and family in America.
Well, and in some strange way, looking at this may put more impetus behind, okay, let's protect those 2017 tax cuts so people don't get hit by any kind of higher prices for even a short period of time, so that they don't get hit with that, and basically a tax increase if that doesn't pass in the budget. All right. Fox Business's Charlie Gasparino has a new piece. It's called Ignore the Stock Market, Wall Street Dealing with Painful Detox from Government Spending Addiction, which is what Steve just experienced under Biden, well, and for decades. Come on. The federal government has been addicted to spending. Here's a quote. Think of the current U.S. economy as a junkie weaning himself off of heroin, which is never easy. It's been addicted to the heroin of government spending, both monetary and fiscal, for so long that we are running $2 trillion deficits when the economy is growing nearly 3% with low unemployment, as sleepy Joe Biden spent money we didn't have. Steve.
That's absolutely true. Under Joe Biden, the only thing that kept the economy going was massive, massive trillions of spending. When COVID, right before COVID, we had about a $4 trillion budget. So that was only, what, 5 or 6 years ago. You know what our budget is today? $7 trillion. $7 trillion. We've gone from $4 to $7 trillion. What have we gotten for all that money? So we have got to drastically downsize. And what Elon Musk is doing, Harris, that is so productive is he's showing the American people, look, we don't have to cut your Social Security benefit. We don't have to cut your Medicare benefit. We don't have to, sacrifice on our national security. We can just take a chainsaw to the waist in the fraud. I mean, look at Medicaid. Medicaid is one of the largest programs. One out of every four people on Medicaid is a fraudulent user of that program. 1 out of every 4. Harris, that's costing us $100 billion a year.
And I know that the idea, and some people push back, you got to protect the people who really are legitimately there. And I know it's sometimes a sledgehammer and sometimes a scalpel with Doge, and the process is playing out before our very eyes. Steve Moore, it is great to have you on the program, always. Thanks for being with me. This is breaking news right now. A new day in Canada with a new tariff from Donald Trump, and you were here with me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you having me, Caroline. A couple of questions for you, if I may. First on the stock market. So currently, it's the 25th anniversary today of the dot-com bubble crash. There's a lot of concern for a lot of Americans right now about the state of the economy. President Trump has refused to rule out a recession. Secretary Lutnick, however, has told us there will not be one. So can the White House just tell and assure Americans today that there's not going to be a recession?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So let me start by saying that, first of all, when it comes to the stock market, the numbers that we see today, the numbers we saw yesterday, the numbers we'll see tomorrow are a snapshot of a moment in time. And as President Trump has said, and I'm here to echo the remarks of this president of this White House, we are in a period of economic transition. We are in a period of transition from the mess that was created under Joe Biden in the previous administration. Joe Biden left this country in an economic disaster. Several statistics to point out. The delinquency rate on credit card loans increased 63% under Joe Biden, hitting a near 12-year high. Under Joe Biden, all net job growth went to foreign-born Americans. Real wages declined by 1.5% under Joe Biden. And as we all know, and this administration continues to combat, prices soared more than 20% under Joe Biden because of his reckless spending and economic policies. So we are in a period of transition from that economic nightmare under a president who had no idea what he was doing, never held a private sector job in his life, into a golden age of American manufacturing under a businessman and a deal maker in chief in President Donald J. Trump, who is implementing the formula that we know works. Look at President Trump's results in his first term. If people are looking for certainty, they should look at the record of this president. That's why the American people re-elected him back to this office. And look at everything that President Trump has already done and his team has already done in just 51 days. The massive efforts to deregulate. Tax cuts, which we need Congress to pass the Trump economic agenda, the Trump tax cuts, which will unleash economic growth. And the president also addressed this directly, I will point out as well, when you look at what he said on Air Force One. And he said he wants the American people to have so much money in their pockets they don't even know what to do with it. That's the intent of this administration, and we're working very hard every day on that goal.
So you said that the Dow dropping and dropping and dropping is a period of transition. You're sure nobody here at the White House shorted the Dow?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. But is there any concern here that it's going to be harder to ask certain federal workers to retire if they look at their retirement accounts and they're getting robbed every day?
Well, I'm glad you brought up workers, because that's exactly who President Trump is looking out for with his America First trade policy and his America First economic agenda. And if you look at, there's great indication to be optimistic about where the economy stands. And the American people, investors, CEOs, small business owners, but most importantly, workers, should bet on President Trump, because his tariff policies, what he envisions is reciprocity, fair trade practices where American workers are put first and are no longer ripped off by foreign countries all over this world.
President Trump says he's going to buy a Tesla today. Did he buy it? And when is the last time he drove a car?
That's a very good question. I have heard the president remark that he misses being able to drive, that luxury of driving his own vehicle, although the Beast is nice, but he is going to be viewing a Tesla that is making its way to the White House complex now, I can confirm. Perhaps the press pool today will have an opportunity to witness this very exciting moment later this afternoon. But a Tesla is on its way here now, and we'll see if the president likes it when he checks it out.
So they're bringing him a Tesla to look at, and if he likes it, he's just going to buy it.
You know, he's definitely going to buy one, but he'll take a look at it when it gets here later this afternoon.
Full retail?
Yes, full market price.
All right, another rough day on Wall Street. Down or a little under 400 points there. The Dow, it closed almost 900 points in the red yesterday. Spooked investors, worried about these tariff policies and whether they might be driving the economy into a recession. The president not wanting to say no to that question. Our next guest, though, argues in a New York Post piece that you should ignore the stock market and that massive government spending from past administrations is really what is happening and made this inevitable. Let's bring in Charlie Gasparino, Fox Business senior correspondent. Hey, Charlie, thanks for being here.
I feel very uncomfortable saying ignore the stock market as someone who covers the stock market for so long. I don't think you should ignore it, but there are certain things going on here that the stock market doesn't appreciate. The stock market essentially overcorrects on the downside on negative news all the time. It doesn't take into account the positive stuff often. And, I've been seeing this for years. A great example is what happened in 2009, right after Barack Obama became president. The Dow went down to 6,000. They thought we were still in the middle of a financial crisis. And what they didn't see was just all the efforts to juice the economy and, get it going, the money printing that bailed out the banks and essentially led to a very big stock market rally over the next, until very recently, as a matter of fact. We've had positives in the Dow and the S&P ever since. We're getting some of that now. The market's not factoring in the good stuff that Trump's doing, which is cutting taxes, cutting deregulation, weaning the economy, the private economy, off government. is a huge thing. It's going to take a little pain. Think of reverse Keynesian economics. Instead of spending your way into positive job growth, you're cutting, and you're trying to get the private economy to do that, because if you allow the government to do that, we're going to get a lot of debt, and then you definitely have fiscal Armageddon. So this is a transitionary period, and again, let's face it, the last 4 years, who did really well? The fat cats. The people I write about all the time, they did great. Average Americans didn't do so well. They don't have huge 401ks. They get crushed by inflation. This economy's been inflated. Financial assets have been inflated, so they can't afford it. So we're getting a little comeuppance for the fat cat crowd here.
Well, Charlie, you wrote very colorfully in the New York Post, sort of explaining what we're seeing. I want to read our audience just a line from it. Think of the current U.S. economy as a junkie weaning himself off heroin, which is never easy. It's been addicted to the heroin of government spending, both monetary and fiscal, for so long. We are running $2 trillion deficits when the economy is growing near 3%, with low unemployment as sleepy Joe Biden spent money we didn't have. But the question I want to ask you, because you said just now that the market's not pricing in tax cuts and deregulation, but of course, I mean, that hasn't happened yet. And if you can't predict when it's going to happen, how could the market price that into what's happening right now? And if it really is going to be okay, why doesn't the president just say that?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, markets are fickle, and again, they basically overcorrect on the downside a lot. So just keep that in mind, why they're not pricing in the tax cuts and the positive stuff from the Trump economic agenda. But I think you're on firm ground by asking why the president isn't out there touting the positive side of his agenda. I mean, I sat through a speech by his Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, the other day at the New York Economic Club, and it was all this stuff about tariffs, which, by the way, tariffs, the market obviously hates tariffs, okay? Whether they're necessary or not to equalize trade is a whole other story. But he started explaining this stuff. My eyes were glazing over. I mean, if you're going to sell this thing, you got to sell it. And you don't sell it by touting tariffs right off the bat. You can explain tariffs in the context of all the good stuff, and they are not doing that. And so the markets are part of that. This is a missed sales job from, not selling it right. It's the best way to put it, their economic agenda. But, that might change. Hire some better speechwriters for Mr. Bessent. And maybe Donald Trump could get out there and talk about the positive stuff, because he's got a really good plan. Yeah. And by the way, this tariff stuff, if you start unspooling exactly our trade relationships, I mean, I don't know if I can really argue with Trump or Peter Navarro or Bessent about, we're at a disadvantage with these countries.
Yeah, the numbers are for sure on his side.
There's just no doubt. But the question is, how do you sell it? And, should you prioritize tariffs over tax cuts? And, these are, the markets are reacting to the fact that they're not prioritizing tax cuts over tariffs right now.
One takes Congress and the other does not. And we also know that the president is superstitious. And so if you say there's going to be no recession, it's probably somewhere in the back of his mind that, you don't want to make that bet. But of course, even a short recession, 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, at the time when, federal workers are retiring, we're trying to shrink government, pass tax cuts and everything else, it gets a little dicey.
It gets dicey, but here's what I would say. You're a kid. You don't remember Ronald Reagan's first 2 years. Ask John about that. we had a tough economy, and then it was 7 fat years.
That's a very nice compliment. I'm going to pass it along to my Botox injector. Thank you, Charlie. Have a good day.
Addiction, even to government spending, is not overcome, folks, without withdrawal. And the U.S. market's going through some pretty harsh shakes right now, but none of this should be a surprise.
We will put a tariff on all of those cars to a point where they won't be able to sell them, because we want them to build their plants in the United States. It's about some proper cost cutting. You know who we're going to use for that? Elon.
See, no surprises. So in the past 20 years, government spending, look at this. See, this is what we're trying to unravel at this point when you're watching all of this happen. So spending went from $2.5 trillion about 20 years ago to $7.2 trillion per year. That's how much the government has been spending. That's why the government got bigger and bigger and bigger. Our debt, because all this costs a lot of money, from $7 trillion to an astonishing $36 trillion So fixing these issues, like think about if your credit card just got completely out of control. You're not going to fix it overnight.
Really, I just don't want America to go bankrupt. I'm just here trying to make government more efficient, eliminate waste and fraud, and so far we're making good progress, actually.
That was Elon with Larry Kudlow yesterday. So remember this, too. 83% of Americans during the election said they wanted substantial change or complete and total overhaul of how the country is run. So that is what we're watching in the first 50 days here. It's a painful detox, to extend the drug addict analogy, as Charlie Gasparino did in his piece today. He was with us yesterday. Today, we've got Mark Tepper, Strategic Wealth Partners President and CEO, and Dagan McDowell, host of The Bottom Line on Fox Business. Great to have both of you with us. You know, your thoughts as we watch this market coming off its lows today. Dagan, let me start with you.
And I think if you look at the NASDAQ, I turned to Mark when we were sitting in the green room. I went, is the NASDAQ actually up?
Yeah.
I don't pay attention as much to the stock market in this environment as I do to the bond market, and particularly to longer term interest rates and what the U.S. government has to pay to borrow at this moment, because that is what President Trump and his entire economic team are focused on. And that is, and Elon Musk talked about this yesterday. He said, we have this enormous federal budget deficit. It is $2 trillion, the deficit, and it keeps growing. Our interest payments are higher than our Defense Department budget. I think that was the wake-up call for me. Our interest is even higher. What we pay every year in interest, and we've talked about this, is even higher than what we spend on Medicare. It is the second largest budget item, our interest expense, next to Social Security. And if we can't get out, eradicate the budget deficit and get our interest expense in check, and if it starts mushrooming it, that is the death spiral of the American economy. And again, so I watch the longer-term interest rates. Longer-term interest rates have actually fallen. They're below 4.3%. That is great news if people want to buy a home, because it means their mortgage rates are coming down. But it also means that in the next 2 years, the United States government is going to have to refinance. This is the outstanding, the marketable U.S. Treasury debt. The United States government has 57% of our marketable debt as a nation has to be refinanced in the next 2 years.
At higher rates.
Because of what Joe Biden and Janet Yellen and company did. So if the most important thing to watch now is President Trump, are they getting our financial house in order? Are borrowing rates in check so we can right-size the nation? And the answer is yes. So the stocks might be selling off.
So there's obviously,
a
lot of battle over this tariff issue, Mark. Yeah. At the highest echelons of people who look at the financial situation here, and this throwback soundbite to Ronald Reagan back in 1982 is getting quite a bit of play today. In fact, the New York Post reported that Jamie Dimon was recommending it to take a look at, which tells you about his feelings on this. Watch this.
We're in the same boat with our trading partners. If one partner shoots a hole in the boat, does it make sense for the other one to shoot another hole in the boat? Some say yes and call that getting tough. Well, I call it stupid. We shouldn't be shooting holes. We should be working together to plug them up.
So, Mark, I think the imbalance between what we were paying in tariffs and what other people were paying us was very different back in 1982. But what are your thoughts on the tariff situation?
Look, I think President Trump, what he wants to do first and foremost is he wants to ensure that anyone we're trading with, there is a level playing field. We have been taken advantage of for such a long time. And I think it was Senator Rand Paul, maybe 6 to 12 months ago. He made a comment and he said something along the lines of, why does America have to be everybody's sugar daddy? It seems like we are willing to bail everyone out, not just our failed companies here in the U.S., but in every other country as well. And we've really had enough of that. So when it comes to the tariffs, I can tell you firsthand, I'm a Young Presidents Organization, YPO member, so I'm talking with small business owners every single day. These are small business owners who were super pumped in November after the election. They're like, oh my gosh, this is great. We can now execute on this growth plan, that growth plan. They are hesitant and tentative right now because they don't have clarity. Yeah. As soon as they get clarity, they'll move forward with their initiatives.
Because they're paying more for stuff on their supply lines and all of those costs that are going up that they're worried about. Thank you very much, you guys. We'll keep an eye on where this goes.
Let's talk now with the Secretary of Energy, Secretary Chris Wright, who joins us now. Great to have you, Mr. Secretary. What do you think today, where we stand, not on the ups and downs of the momentary ticker of the stock market, but where we're pointed over the long haul for the United States economy?
Look, President Trump is a businessman. Thank God he became elected president. And what we're seeing right now is a master negotiator practicing his craft. He got elected to lower costs and grow opportunities for Americans, and he is working feverishly, 7 days a week at that, bringing in other businessmen, having dialogue, some of which you see in public, most of which are happening behind closed scenes. But I could not be more optimistic. 50 days into this administration, we have seen simply tremendous achievements, and wait till you see what happens in the next 50 days.
Well, not all of that's happening behind closed doors, is it, Mr. Secretary? I believe that optimism, which President Trump just echoed on the White House lawn, is not simply cheerleading. It's echoed out right now in the private sector. Here's the evidence. Several companies are eyeing expansion back into the United States amid these tariffs. You can see on the list of these companies, Campari, Copal Electronics, Hyundai, Honda, Invective, LG Electronics, Samsung, and others, including Volkswagen, looking to bring jobs back to America. But also, Mr. Secretary, corporate CEO confidence is almost working inverse to the stock market right now. President Trump shared this, and it's also been backed up here with these surveys. 44% of CEOs said economic conditions are better now than they were 6 months ago. 52% say they're looking for it to improve over the next 6 months. And 71% plan to raise wages over the next year. So I do believe there's some evidence to back up that optimism.
I love that last number. Over 70% say they expect to raise wages in the next year. And look, you mentioned that tariffs, they incentivize investment in the United States. That's 100% true. But it's not just tariffs. Just a smarter, more thoughtful, practical business climate means you want to put capital into the United States. I'm down at this energy conference in Houston. I've spoken with leaders from all over the world, and the one common theme is how can we increase our investments in the United States? Common sense has returned to Washington, and investment climate is attractive to us, the businesses of our country. How can we best invest in your country? It is simply energizing to see the mood across the world at this energy conference in Houston.
Mr. Secretary, I do want to ask you about tariffs and as it relates specifically to your department, to energy. President Trump put this out on Truth Social over the prospect of the premier from Ontario shutting off electricity to combat tariffs. Trump said, why would we allow another country to supply us electricity even for a small area? Who made these decisions and why? Can you imagine Canada stooping so low as to use electricity that so affects the life of innocent people as a bargaining chip and threat? They will pay financial price for this so big that it will be read about in the history books for many years to come. Why do we have electricity that we depend on coming from Canada?
Well, hydroelectric. They have dams in Ontario that got to go to marketplace, and those dams are not far from the U.S. border. So we do have free flow of electricity, free flow of oil and natural gas both ways across the U.S.-Canadian border. Energy systems are large scale, so they just tend to be built that way. But yeah, of course, that was an outrageous claim that we heard coming out of Canada. But I want to point out, of course, it's already been removed. Threatening energy security, that's why President Trump got elected. We were really degrading energy security in this country for 4 straight years. That was heading in a train wreck direction. Higher prices for American, less job opportunities, less investment here. An AI race was about to kick off, and we were set up to lose. We cannot afford to lose the AI race to China.
Think of the national defense security implications of that. I think Americans recognize that. They brought President Trump back into power, and he is full steam ahead. We've got to grow energy in the United States, increase our energy security, drive down prices, and enable the investment conditions so the United States can lead on AI. That's a lot of reversals that have to happen. But believe me, this administration with President Trump's leadership is working on that every day, 7 days a week.
All right. As you mentioned, we've already seen that reversal when it comes to denying electricity to the northern states in the United States from Canada. All right. Thank you so much, Secretary Wright, for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Will.
You want my notes?
Yeah.
They gave me notes. I said, I'm not Biden. I don't need notes.
Okay.
This is a different panel than I've had. Everything's computer. That's beautiful. Think Biden could get into that car? I like is that one.
And how does this work?
And I want that same color. I love Tesla.
The president and his tech support, Donald Trump and Elon Musk, turning the White House lawn into a showroom for Tesla after the president made good on his promise to buy one of the electric cars, a show of support for his Doge captain, whose company has become a target of left-wing violent protests. Watch.
I think he's been treated very unfairly by a very small group of people. And I just want people to know that you can't be penalized for being a patriot. And he's a great patriot. In the time I've known him, he has never asked me for a favor. He didn't ask me for this. I said, you know, Elon, I don't like what's happening to you. This man is a great patriot, and you should cherish him. You should cherish him. You know, I have a little statement. We have to take care of our high IQ people because we don't have too many of them.
Judge, this is a show of friendship and loyalty. Loyalty goes both ways, and this was a real public showing of this is a good car, this is a good man.
Yeah, you know, it's very Donald Trump. I mean, from the beginning. I mean, if he could help someone, he will do it. And, you know, there's no question. Look, Elon Musk is not in politics. He's not used to this. I mean, you know, he's in the business world, but I mean, he is despised. They are, you know, throwing Molotov cocktails into parking lots. He's lost billions because he's not able to really focus on his own business. So he's suffering a lot. He's taking a lot of attacks, suffering financially. He's physically exhausted. I mean, he hasn't stopped. So, you know, the president is like, you know, doing him a solid and saying, look, you know, this guy is helping us. Look, Doge is very important to this government and to what the president is trying to do to the economy that was totally destroyed by Joe Biden. I mean, we've got this $2 trillion yearly deficit. And I keep hearing people say that the interest rate is higher than our Department of Defense spending. And so, you know, we're in a bit of a tough time economically. And, you know, Elon Musk is doing everything he can to help the president.
One thing that I thought earlier today was that if I were them, I would keep the focus more on Biden for a little while, right? You can ride that a little bit because you inherited this situation. He went back to it a little bit today, but just as a reminder of what people had.
Well, yeah, I think because you're talking about a transition.
Yeah.
And I think the media is trying to paint this as a shock to the system. And what Trump is doing is trying to remind you what was there before. Mm-hmm. And you would think that, like, Democrats would go for this because they love a good transition. However, this one, it just isn't absurd enough for their liking. You know, they're good with little boys, turn them into little girls, fossil fuels, you know, into wind power, red meat, no, eat insects. All of those transitions are categorically insane. But here is actually a practical, real transition where you're taking a system that is corrupt and wasteful and you're trying to make it better. And what do? We need to set fire with Tesla dealerships. And the judge is right. Like, they're also claiming that somehow Musk is in this for himself. This guy's risking the bankruptcy of his company to prevent the bankruptcy of his country. And the media is, again, choosing the wrong path. It's almost a parallel to what they did with the cover-up of Biden. When they covered up Biden, that was to make the Dems look better and bad for Trump. Then they try to destroy Elon, so the Dems look better and it's bad for Trump. But they always shift this codependent alliance against something that is positive for the country, because if it's positive for the country, it doesn't help the Democrats.
It's not good for them.
Yeah.
President Trump also answered some questions on the recent turmoil in the stock market. Of course, there are fears of recession and tariffs. Let's listen.
I think our country had to do this. We had to go and do this. They've taken away, other countries have taken away our business. They've taken away our jobs. You're going to have drops and markets are going to go up and they're going to go down.
Yeah.
But you know what? We have to rebuild our country. Our country has been stripped of its jobs, of its factories, and I'm very optimistic. I have to tell you, I'm very optimistic about the country. Much more optimistic this way than if I did it the easy way.
Yeah.
I could have done it the easy way. I could have coasted. Biden left us a mess. Right now, we're like a chicken that's being plucked at from all over the world. We're not going to let that happen anymore.
Do you think there will be a recession?
I don't see it at all. I think this country is going to boom. I think we're going to have an economy that's a real economy, not a fake economy.
The chicken analogy was a good one.
Yeah, and egg prices are down, Jessica. How'd that happen? Oh, I guess we stopped slaughtering all of the chickens. Stocks were pretty good under Joe Biden because he slept all day. Market loves certainty. He made no news, took no action, and the market took off. And that's fine. But it didn't help the American worker one bit. American worker got crushed by migrants and inflation. And that's why Trump was elected, to come in and fix that, to help Main Street. Not Wall Street. Wall Street's going to be fine. Wall Street's always fine, especially during globalization. And that was good. You know, we had a lot of multinational companies in this country do very well. Stock market was roaring. Prices were low. But there was also a downside. We lost 100,000 manufacturing plants, millions of jobs. But there was something more. The fabric of the nation was destroyed. Because what does it mean when you lose a job if you're a man? Maybe you lose your wife. Maybe you turn to drugs. These towns in middle America were ripped apart. And that's why Trump was elected in 2016. And he did make a lot of progress there. But then COVID hit. And we realized that we needed to get these supply chains back domestically because it's an issue of national security. So that's what he's trying to do. And the market does not like the uncertainty. And I understand that. It's unpredictable. But the goal is to bring key supply chains back to this country and use tariffs the same way Nixon did, Reagan did, Bush did, to restore the manufacturing base in this country so we have steel to make ships, so we can make medicine, so we make automobiles here, and we have good paying jobs that boost wages. And we control the border, we stop government spending that reduces inflation, and that's what you call a real economy. And these are tough decisions he's making, and he's making them because he's not running for re-election. He doesn't care about the politics. He's doing tough stuff that politicians usually don't do because it's unpopular, but it's in the long-term interest of the American economy.
Jessica, what do you think of that?
It was beautiful. It was largely inaccurate, but it was a
Which
beautiful
part?
one. All of it?
Name one part.
That your wife leaves you if you lose your job. It's a pretty crappy marriage.
Have you seen what happened to the heartland? With
They're
the
all
drugs
single dudes now?
and the unemployment levels?
Okay.
It's why Obama was such a bad president. He had to bring Trump in to fix it.
Okay. So if Trump was thinking about the future, the beautiful future of the country, then he would be looking at that spending bill that Mike Johnson put forward, which is going to add, what, $7 trillion to the deficit. And he'd be saying, well, maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe my friends don't need a tax cut. Maybe this should be more evenly distributed. Maybe we should help out the little guy and give them a tax cut instead of the people who paid to get me in there. And you say, he's doing Elon Musk a solid. Elon Musk spent $290 million to get him elected. He owes Elon Musk that car commercial, which maybe it's an ethics violation. Even the strongest allies of the president don't like these tariffs. They might think it's possible to use them at smaller levels, 5%, 10%, but the tariff whiplash is destroying us. You look at the market tanking, and I thought Peter Doocy had a great point earlier on today, our very own Peter Doocy, where he said they want federal workers to take the buyout. They want them to retire, but they're sinking their retirement accounts. And Caroline Leavitt is standing up there at the podium, and she's just either she doesn't know how a tariff works or she's lying to the people. She said tariffs are a tax hike on foreign countries and a tax cut for the American people. And then a reporter, I think from the AP, so they got back in the room, said, have you ever paid a tariff? I have. They don't get charged on foreign countries. And then she went Trumpian. She goes, I think it's insulting that you're trying to test my knowledge on economics. I'll test your knowledge on economics, Jesse.
Go.
Are tariffs a tax on the American consumer?
If you have a tariff
No.
on a product, Jessica,
Yeah,
what
you are.
that
Yes or
does
no
is
thing.
it makes
Why?
American workers
It's not-
richer.
This is
because
what's
then you
stupid.
buy American and you bring American plants back to this country.
Listen.
That's the point. And every president has done it. And it's usually resulted in bringing jobs
He
back.
has had
Did you
the
know
worst
that
50
Richard
days
Nixon
of an American
did you know
presidency
that
for the
Richard Nixon
market
literally
since 2009. And 2009 we were in a recession.
began the pickup truck industry in this country because of a tariff on the Europeans? Did you know that Reagan slapped tariffs on Japan, ended up triggering
Did anyone
a
slap tariffs on
semiconductor
Canada?
renaissance in this country?
On Canada.
He is protecting American industries.
From
Why
the
do we rely
Canadians?
on Canada for energy anyway? And that's part of the problem.
Do you
we
think
need
this
to
is the
bring
right way?
manufacturing into this country, and countries are buckling. Big corporations are buckling. They're talking about coming here because they don't want to be taxed. This is going to benefit the American worker, American manufacturing, and domestic production, and it's going to preserve jobs. So stop with the tariffs. It's the leverage
He
that
needs
we
to
need
stop
to
with the
protect.
tariffs.
No. I'm glad he did what he did with Canada because they
you
wanna
have
be-
enough money to survive
No, that's
it.
not the point. Look, it's going to float all boats. Come on, Jessica.
Really?
The truth is that this is something that's going to benefit all Americans when we've got more jobs here and we've got all kinds of foreign money coming into this country. We saw it in the press conferences, $500 billion like one day. They can't wait to come here and set
What
up
about
shop.
the tax breaks that I talked
well,
about?
You know what?
Are those
We're
lifting all
right
boats?
now, we're trying to clean up Joe Biden's mess. Okay? 4 years of a disaster that we've got to clean up. He could do what Joe Biden did and just float along, or what other presidents do. He said, I'm going to clean up this mess. It's not an easy job. I'm going to take the hit, but I'm going to bring business back.
He's
and
not
he will.
taking any hit.
Just two quick things. One, you don't pay a tax on something you don't buy. That's the whole point of tariffs. You end up buying something here. Number two, the biggest tax we experienced was the inflation. We printed more money. What was it, like 40% of our entire currency in history in the last 4 years was printed. That was inflation.
Can I just say one more thing to Jessica while I have her here?
I'm going to be here the whole hour, unfortunately, for everyone.
Why don't you ever talk to other countries and ask them to lower their tariffs?
I'd be happy to.
No, but you never
Make us a
mentioned
deal,
that.
guys. Yes,
Why
I
don't criticize them once?
You never talk
it's
about
always
other
been-
countries.
Oh, this
He's
is my
trying to level
favorite.
the playing field. That's what this is.
Jessica's anti-American. I got it.
I would
now.
say also AP didn't lose their seat in the briefing room. It was just it's about the pool, which is a little bit different.